Sex and Sorcery, The Silent King's Symphony. Friends, before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a new audiobook, and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you in advance. The first time he kissed me, I tasted moonlight and forgotten symphonies. His lips were cool against mine, but where they touched, my skin warmed as if brushed by a summer sun. We were in my tower room, the windows thrown open to the Eldorian night, the distant sounds of the city a hushed melody beneath the sigh of the wind. His hands, elegant and strong, cradled my face as if I were a precious, fragile instrument. Lord Theron of the Ether Weavers Guild didn't just kiss a woman. He composed a sonnet against her mouth, each movement deliberate, each pause filled with unspoken magic. I, Serena Vane, a mere scribe in the eyes of the guilds, was his secret nocturne. My fingers traced the line of his jaw, feeling the subtle hum of power beneath his skin. The air around us shimmered with the aftermath of his magic, a scent of ozone and night-blooming orchids. This was our fourth tryst, and each felt more perilous than the last. I was playing with a fire that could illuminate me or turn me to ash. "You are quiet tonight, my muse," he murmured against my lips, his breath a warm caress. His thumb stroked my cheekbone, and I felt the familiar, thrilling pull of his desire, a current that threatened to sweep me away. "Some melodies are too beautiful for words, my lord," I breathed, my own hidden magic, a quiet empathy that let me feel the truths people hid, stirring in response. I sensed the genuine heat of his want, but beneath it, the steady, chilling rhythm of his ambition. I was a delightful distraction, a passionate interlude in the grand composition of his life. "Theron," he insisted, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through me. "When we're like this, I am simply Theron." But he was never simple. He was a movement in a much larger, more dangerous piece. His mouth found mine again, deeper this time, and for a heart-stopping moment, the world narrowed to the slide of silk, the press of his body, the frantic, hopeful beat of my own heart. It was a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a farewell. Later, as the moon began its descent, he dressed with the same precise grace he used to cast spells. He left a single, perfect crystal rose on my pillow, its petals holding a captured, shimmering cord that would slowly fade over the week. A beautiful, ephemeral gift. I lay in the ruins of my sheets, the ghost of his touch on my skin, and wondered if this was how a star felt, burning brilliantly before it collapsed. The memory of him was a persistent, aching warmth as I entered the moon and ember that evening. The tavern was our sanctuary, its low ceilings and roaring hearth a grounding counterpoint to the dizzying heights of Theron's tower. The scent of spiced wine and wood smoke was the perfume of reality. Mira was already there, a bastion of crimson robes and legal severity. She took one look at my face and set down her scroll with a definitive thud. "You have that look. I've been seduced by a pretty melody and ignored the discordant notes. Look. Should I prepare a class action lawsuit against emotional negligence?" I slid into the seat opposite her, a wry smile touching my lips. "Against the future head of the Ether Weavers? You'd have more success arguing a case against gravity. The laws of physics are notoriously stubborn," she conceded, taking a sip of her wine. "But at least they're consistent. Men like Theron change their tune depending on the audience." Her green eyes, however, held a flicker of genuine worry behind the razor wire of her sarcasm. Kala arrived then, a symphony in sapphire silk. The air around her shifted, carrying the scent of amber and something sharper, like crystallized lightning. "Darlings," she purred, settling beside me and summoning the wine carafe with a flick of her wrist. The emotional frequency in here is crescendoing. Her amber eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned me. A complex composition indeed. High passion, but with a troubling minor key of apprehension. She added a single, iridescent drop from a vial at her hip to her glass. The liquid swirled into a mesmerizing vortex of violet and gold. A harmonizing agent. For when the heart's rhythm grows erratic. "My heart is perfectly in time," I said, though it skipped a beat at her accuracy. Famous last words of every tragic heroine, Mira muttered into her glass. Our quartet was completed by Biana's arrival, which was, as always, announced by a gust of wind that made the candle flame shiver. Her storm knight armor was dusted with the grit of the training grounds, her dark curls a tempest around a face etched with frustration. "Don't ask," she grumbled, collapsing into her chair and reaching for the carafe. She drank deeply, then slammed it down. "The commander." Another lecture on harmonic control of my powers. As if the storm inside me cares for harmony. She flexed her fingers, and a tiny, angry spark leaped to the wooden table, leaving a blackened pinprick. She stared at it, her expression a mix of defiance and despair. It's getting harder to hold it back. It's like a song that's too loud, too wild. I'm afraid I'll drown out everything else. Everyone else. The table fell quiet. My personal drama with Theron felt suddenly small and self-indulgent in the face of Biana's constant, internal war. It was then that the door to the moon and ember opened, and the very air in the room stilled, as if waiting for a conductor's downbeat. He was not a guild lord. He was a silence where noise should be. Dressed in worn, gray leathers, he moved with a predator's economy, his presence absorbing the sound around him. His hair was the color of ash, and his face was all sharp, quiet planes. But it was his eyes that held me. They were the color of a winter sky just before snow, a pale, piercing gray, and they were utterly focused on our table. He crossed the room, the crowd parting for him not out of respect, but out of an instinctive unease. He stopped before us, his gaze of physical weight. "My name is Ronan," he said, his voice a low, hushed thing, like wind through bare branches. It carried no magic I could sense, yet it commanded absolute attention. "I am a hunter of the unmade." He placed a small, smooth river stone on our table. It was gray and unremarkable, but as it settled, the ambient noise of the tavern, the chatter, the clink of glasses, the crackle of the fire faded into an eerie, localized hush around our table. "The silent king stirs," he said, the words dropping into the quiet like stones into a deep well. An entity from before music, before words. It devours sound, emotion, connection. It seeks to unmake the symphony of existence into perfect, eternal silence. His winter gray eyes locked with mine, and I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. Its prison is weakening, and it is drawn to the most vibrant, complex melodies it can find to consume first. His gaze was an accusation and a plea. It is coming for the one who gives stories a voice. It is coming for you. The silence Ronan had brought with him was a living entity, pressing in on our table, swallowing the comforting sounds of the tavern. It is coming for you. The words echoed in the hollow space left by the vanished noise. I could feel my own heartbeat, a frantic, terrified drum against my ribs. Theron's kisses, his whispered sonnets, felt like a lifetime ago. This was a different kind of seduction, the cold, stark seduction of absolute finality. Mira was the first to break the spell, her voice cutting through the unnatural quiet with the precision of a scalpel. The Silent King, a pre-musical entity. The burden of proof for such a claim is metaphysical. You're presenting a folktale as fact and asking us to base a course of action on it that would likely violate a dozen guild ordinances. Ronan's pale gray eyes didn't flicker. The proof is in the silence growing at the edges of your perception, Mistress Doran. Have songs not felt thinner lately? Laughter more brittle? The spaces between words heavier? It feeds on resonance. It starves the world of its music. A chill that had nothing to do with the tavern's air washed over me. He was right. My own writing had felt strained, the words lacking their usual rhythm. The city's famous street musicians played with a muted desperation. And Theron's compositions, had they always held that faint, mournful undertone? Calla leaned forward, her alchemist's fascination overriding her fear. The degradation of ambient emotional harmonics. I've documented a marked decrease in the vibrancy of my acoustic-based elixirs. The bass notes are fading. She looked at Ronan with a new, intense curiosity. You're saying this. Entropy has a consciousness. A hunger. Bianna stood, her chair scraping loudly in the hush. The tiny sparks at her fingertips, usually so bright, seemed dimmed. My storm, she said, her voice tight. It's quiet, like a song I can't quite remember. If this thing takes that from me, what's left? Her hand went to the hilt of her sword, a gesture of habit, but it lacked its usual conviction. It doesn't take, Ronan corrected, his voice still that low, hushed rasp. It unmakes. It doesn't just silence your storm, Lady Storm. It would erase the very concept of it from the world's memory. His gaze swept over us, lingering on me. Its prison is the echoing chasm, deep beneath the city. We cannot reinforce the bars. They're made of forgotten sound. The only way to stop it is to remind it why silence is not the answer. We must play a song so beautiful, so true, that it cannot be consumed. A song that reminds it of what it seeks to destroy. Mira scoffed, but it was a weak, hollow sound. And I suppose you have a musical score for saving all of existence? No, Ronan said, his eyes finding each of ours in turn. But I have you. A friendship that is a four-part harmony. A logic that provides the structure, an alchemy that provides the texture, a storm that provides the passion, and a heart, his gaze settled on me, that provides the melody. You are a living symphony, and that is a power the Silent King has never faced. He was speaking to the very essence of what bound us together. He saw past our titles and our magic to the core of our connection. The plan is artistic suicide, Mira stated, her arms crossed. We march into the most desolate place in Eldoria and sing at the void? Essentially, yes, Ronan replied, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like grim amusement in his wintry eyes. I can guide you to the chasm. My nature allows me to move through its influence. But once we are there, you must perform. Your combined resonance must be a counter-melody so powerful it overwrites the king's silence. The risk was a yawning chasm itself. Failure meant not just death, but the unmaking of our very essence. But the alternative, allowing this entity to use me as its entry point to devour all song, all story, all emotion from the world, was a silence more terrifying than any death. I thought of Theron, of the beautiful, controlled compositions of his life. Would he even hear the world growing quieter? Or was he too engrossed in his own symphony to notice? "We'll do it," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Bianna gave a sharp nod, a glimmer of her old fire returning. Kala was already inspecting her vials, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I may have something to enhance our collective resonance." Mira let out a long, weary breath. "I'll attempt to find a legal precedent for sonic existential defense." The journey to the echoing chasm was a descent into a wound in the world. The path led down, through caverns where the very rock seemed to absorb sound, leaving our footsteps dead and flat. The air grew cold and thin, and the light from the glowing Maas Ronin carried seemed to dim, as if the darkness itself was thirsty. The chasm itself was a vast, black expanse, a canyon of nothingness. There was no wind, no drip of water, no echo. It was the absolute absence of sound, a pressure that made my ears ache and my soul feel thin. At the heart of the chasm floated a figure. It was not a king in any human sense, but a man-shaped hole in reality, a silhouette of absolute stillness. The Silent King. The air around him was warped, pulling all vibration, all music, all life into its nullifying grasp. As we stood at the edge, the king's attention turned toward us. Not with a look, but with a focus. The silence intensified, becoming a physical force. It pressed against my mind, seeking the melody of my thoughts, the rhythm of my heart, the story of my soul. "Now," Ronan whispered, his voice barely a breath, yet it was the loudest thing in the chasm. "Sing." But the silence was a suffocating blanket. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My story, my melody, was trapped in my throat, frozen by the sheer, overwhelming nothingness. I saw Mira try to speak, to impose her logical order, but her words were swallowed before they formed. Kala's vials, meant to enhance our emotions, seemed to lose their luminescence, their magic muted. Bianna strained, a vein throbbing in her temple, but the storm inside her was terrifyingly still, a lullaby she couldn't wake from. The Silent King began to glide toward us, a void moving through a void. It was coming for me. I could feel it pulling at the edges of my being, unraveling the threads of my memories, my desires, my love for my friends. I was being unmade, note by note. I looked at Ronan, desperate. His gray eyes met mine, and in them I saw not fear, but a profound, aching sorrow. He had faced this before. He had always faced this. And in that moment of absolute despair, I understood. We couldn't fight the silence with a song it could consume. We had to fight it with a silence of our own making. A chosen silence. A shared one. I stopped trying to speak. I stopped trying to force my story out. Instead, I reached out, my hands finding Bianna's and Kala's. Mira, seeing my intent, completed the circle, her grip firm. We stood there, the four of us, hand in hand, facing the advancing void. We didn't make a sound. We simply were. We were the unspoken trust in a shared glance, the memory of laughter in a warm tavern, the fierce, wordless loyalty that had carried us through a decade of life. We were a symphony of silence, but it was our silence. a silence full of meaning, of history, of love. The note was not a sound, but the memory of one. It was the first cry of a newborn, the first plucked string, the first word ever spoken. It hung in the suffocating silence of the chasm, a tiny, defiant spark in an infinite darkness. It had come from us, from the space where our four silences met and became something more. The silent king recoiled as if struck. The void that was its form rippled, and for a terrifying, glorious moment, I saw not a monster, but a being of immense, lonely sorrow. It wasn't evil, it was the embodiment of a forgotten ending, a song that had stopped playing so long ago it had taken the concept of music with it. Our chosen silence, our connected stillness, had not fought it. It had reminded it. The single note blossomed. It wasn't a melody we sang, but one we remembered together. Myra's unwavering logic provided the steady, rhythmic bass line, a foundation of order in the chaos. Kala's alchemical essence wove through it, the shimmering harmony of 1,000 distilled emotions, not of one feeling, but of the beautiful, messy spectrum of being alive. Vienna's storm, no longer silent, rose not as a cacophony, but as the powerful, soaring crescendo of a heart learning to beat without fear. And I gave it the story. I poured into our shared symphony the narrative of our friendship, the witty arguments, the quiet support, the tears shed in the dark, the laughter that echoed in the moon and ember. I gave it the tale of a scribe who fell for a lord who composed sonnets and a hunter who spoke in whispers. It was not a perfect story, but it was true. Our combined resonance, heart, mind, alchemy, and storm, did not attack the king. It enfolded him. The music we created was not a weapon, but an invitation. It was the symphony of a world that, for all its pain and noise, was still worth hearing. The void at the center of the silent king began to fill with light. The absolute stillness softened, shifted, and then it began to listen. The oppressive silence of the chasm transformed. It was no longer an absence, but a rest in the music, a breath between movements. The king was not being destroyed. He was being remembered. He was becoming part of the symphony again, not as its end, but as its necessary pause, the silence that gives music its shape and meaning. The light from the king grew, warm and gentle, and then flowed back into the world around us. The dead rocks of the chasm began to hum with a low, foundational frequency. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential sound. The prison was no longer a cage, it was the world's deepest resonator. The figure of the king faded, his purpose fulfilled, his loneliness ended. He had not been defeated by a louder noise, but healed by a more beautiful one. We stood, trembling, our hands still linked, the last notes of our shared symphony fading into a peaceful, living quiet. The chasm was no longer a place of dread, but a hall of beginnings. Ronan stood before us, and the harsh lines of his face had softened. The winter in his eyes had thawed, revealing a landscape of quiet wonder. "You didn't fight the silence," he said, his voice still a whisper, but now it was the whisper of leaves in a gentle breeze, not the hush of a tune. "You completed it." He looked at me, and the connection I felt was deeper than any I had known with Theron. It wasn't a composed sonnet or a pretty melody. It was the understanding between two people who had stood at the edge of nothing and chosen to make something together. In the days that followed, Eldoria awoke to a new world. The air itself seemed richer, the colors more vibrant. Music poured from every window, not the frantic, desperate tunes of before, but songs full of depth and joy and sorrow. The guilds, sensing the shift, began to change. The Ether Weavers, under Theron's direction, now freed from the subtle influence of the king's draining presence, began to compose music for healing and unity, not just for power. Mira, inspired, began drafting the Acoustic Rights Act, legally recognizing the importance of sound, music, and emotional expression as fundamental to a thriving society. Callah's potions now sang with a pure, clear tone, and she taught others to listen to the music in their own hearts. Vienna's storm was no longer a curse, but a celebrated part of the city's soundscape, the thrilling, powerful timpani role in Eldoria's Grand Opera. She learned to conduct it, and in doing so, found others who were not afraid of her song. And Ronan, he did not return to his lonely hunt. The hunter of the unmade had found something to nurture. He became the warden of the resonant chasm, a guardian who understood the value of both sound and silence. Our conversations were not filled with pretty words, but with the comfortable, profound quiet of two people who no longer needed to perform for each other. His kisses were not sonnets, they were the quiet, perfect resolution at the end of a long and beautiful phrase. For I have learned that the most powerful magic is not in the grandest spell or the most complex enchantment. It is in the simple, courageous act of adding your voice to the world's chorus. It is in the friendship that creates a harmony more beautiful than any solo, and the love that is not a performance, but a duet, a shared breath in the vast, beautiful, and unending symphony of life. And so, the final notes of our symphony fade into a peaceful, hopeful silence, a silence that is no longer empty, but full of meaning. We hope Serena's journey and the powerful harmony of these four women reminded you that even the deepest silence can be healed by the courage to share your true song. But the world of Velvet Valor holds countless more stories waiting to be heard. If this tale of music, silence, and love that found its rhythm in the quiet captured your heart, then you've found your home for full-length, cinematic romantasy. Ready to discover what story awaits you next? Subscribe to Velvet Valor Romantasy Audiobook and never miss a new tale. Let us be your guide through worlds where love is the most beautiful melody. Like this video if you believe in the power of friendship, music, and love that speaks louder than words. Comment below and tell us, what song would you play to heal a broken world? Which of the four women's harmonies resonated most with you? We read every comment and love hearing from our community. Your support is the magic that allows us to create these complete audiobooks. Thank you for listening, for sharing in these emotional journeys, and for keeping your heart open to stories that remind us of the power of connection. Until our next adventure begins. Yours in Stories and Sorcery, the Velvet Valor narrator.